Hey, what's up guys? This is Gary Hott here on my YouTube channel. Well, that's good 86, and today I'm bringing you episode 4 of Hot Boys Garage, where I show you how to degree a camshaft on a 450cc based 4-stroke Unicam engine. So while this video is going to be specific to Honda 450cc based 4-stroke engines, a lot of the principles we're going to talk about today apply across the board to many different engine types. Yamaha YFZ 450s, Raptors, even 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, and V8 engines. I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance because this is probably going to be a pretty long video because degreeing in a camshaft on a 4-stroke engine is kind of a tedious process and it can take a while, especially if it's your first time doing it. So some quick tips just starting out. Number one, there is going to be some math involved, so have a calculator on hand. Take your time, have a clean workspace, write down your shim sizes and all your measurements, and having a beer or two in the process will help. Okay, so what is degreeing a camshaft? Really, we are synchronizing the camshaft's position with the crank. And what we're trying to do is ensure that the center line of the cam lobes are where they should be according to what the manufacturer intended. And so why do we need to do it? We need to do it because there are a lot of different manufacturing tolerances for all of the parts within the rotating assembly. Meaning there are tolerances for the cam gear, the cam chain, the cam sprocket, the crank, and the sprocket on the crank. And all of those things just being a little bit different between manufacturing tolerances can greatly affect cam timing. Another reason we do it is because the position of the cam affects all of the valve timing events. And throughout this video, we're going to talk about the position of the cam relative to top dead center, or TDC. And the most important reason that we degree a camshaft in is for performance. Because where the cam timing is set can affect the power and where the power is made in the RPM range. If you haven't already done so, I would highly suggest checking out Web Camshaft's page on degreeing in a cam. It is an excellent reference. Every time I degree a cam, I've got this thing up so that I can check it and make sure that I'm doing it correctly. That link is at the bottom of the whiteboard here. Alright, so I drew this terrible illustration of a camshaft and the cam events on the whiteboard here. So I'm going to take a quick minute here and explain to you what all is going on in this illustration. The black outline is the camshaft itself. You've got this circle here in the center, which is the base circle of the cam. This lobe coming up here in black on the left is our intake lobe. And the lobe coming up on the right in black is our exhaust lobe. Two important parts in this diagram you can see are this red line here, just coming up from the center of our camshaft through the center of our intake lobe. This is known as the intake lobe centerline, or ICL. And over here we've got the same thing on the exhaust side. This is the exhaust lobe centerline, or the ECL. And the angle between the intake lobe centerline, or the ICL, and the exhaust lobe centerline, ECL, is the lobe separation angle, or the LSA. So on 450cc based 4-stroke engines, this LSA, or lobe separation angle, is static. It can't be changed on the cam that you have. If you want a different LSA, you'll have to have a brand new cam reground. In a quad like a Yamaha YFZ 450, it's a dual overhead cam engine, meaning it has an intake cam and an exhaust cam, and those two cams are separate. So you can actually adjust the lobe separation angle in that type of engine. So moving on, we've got some other valve timing events that happen here. We've got intake closes and intake opens. The distance measured between the two are the camshaft's intake duration. Likewise, on the other side of the camshaft, you have the exhaust opening and closing events, where this is how long the exhaust lobe is keeping the valve open. This is the exhaust duration. And then in between the two events, where both the intake valve and the exhaust valve are both open at the same time, this is known as the overlap. And lastly, you've got the very tip of the intake and exhaust lobes and the bottom of the intake and exhaust lobes. And these both represent the intake valve lift, or how far the cam is lifting the valve off of the seat. So when we talk about degreeing in a camshaft on a 450cc based 4-stroke engine, the main thing that we're interested in is the intake lobe centerline, or ICL. And since our Honda 4-stroke 450cc based engines are Unicam design, that means that moving the intake lobe centerline also moves the exhaust lobe centerline the same amount in the same direction. And since the intake lobe centerline is the more important of the two measurements, we're going to focus on the intake lobe centerline only. That said, you can still check and set the exhaust lobe centerline, but setting the exhaust lobe centerline also affects the intake lobe centerline on Unicam engines. Again, if you've got a YFZ 450 based engine that is dual overhead cam and has separate intake and exhaust cams, you can set these two independently. But with a Honda 450cc based engine, we are most interested in the intake lobe centerline and setting it appropriately such that it is in the position that the cam manufacturer says it should be, or where your builder wants it to be. Setting the intake lobe centerline affects every single valve timing event. It can greatly affect performance, piston to valve clearance, and where your engine is going to make its power at in the RPM range. Alright, now let's take a look at the tools and specialty pieces that you'll need to have on hand to degree in your camshaft on your 450cc based engine. So first you'll need an assortment of ratchets and extensions and sockets. Metric, of course, 12, 10, 8 millimeter. You also need some metric Allen wrenches, large and flat screwdrivers, needle nose pliers, zip ties and cutters, a magnet, flashlight, some engine oil, a large battery or air-powered impact with some pretty good torque is recommended, pen and paper to keep track of your measurements, some feeler gauges, both flat and angled, a dial indicator, a flywheel puller tool, both Tusk and Motion Pro make one of these, some shims. Hott Cams makes a really nice 9.48 millimeter shim kit. It's got a variety of sizes, 3 of each, and a torque wrench. So next you'll want to have some sort of cam degreeing kit, whether it's the Hott Cams degree kit that I'm showing you right here, or one that you piece together yourself. The Hott Cams degree kit is probably the easiest way to go. You can order it on Woodward Specialties, Amazon, just Google search it, you can find it. It comes with the Hott Cams degree wheel, which is a decent size. Also comes with a dial indicator and dial indicator holder. It also comes with several different piston stops and several different bushings to allow the degree wheel to adapt to several different bikes' crankshafts. In this video, I'm going to be degreeing the camshaft of my 450cc based engine with the engine out of the frame. You can also do this with the engine in the frame, but you'll need a much smaller degree wheel, or you'll need an adapter to allow the degree wheel to set out far enough from the engine and frame that it's not going to hit on the frame or anything else that's there. Motion Pro makes this nice, really small degree wheel here. The only issue with it is it comes with a very small hole for the crankshaft. You'll have to drill this out to step it up for whatever crankshaft you've got in your bike. If you do go with this small Motion Pro degree wheel and you do need to drill out this hole to step it up to fit your crankshaft, I highly recommend using a step-up bit, kind of like this, rather than a normal drill bit. It's going to work a whole lot better and not mar that hole up real bad whenever you go to drill it out. Now I'm going to show you guys what I use to degree in the camshafts on my engines. For several years I did use just the Hott Cams degree kit, but over time I kind of sort of pieced together my own degree kit. You see here, this is a Moroso Pro wheel. It's a lot larger than that Motion Pro or the Hott Cams degree wheel you saw earlier. The reason I like the Moroso Pro wheel is it's a lot larger. With a larger wheel like this, you're going to get a lot more consistent and reliable readings. And it just ends up being a little bit more accurate in the long run. You can see it came with a few bushings over here to adapt it to different size crankshafts as well. I've also got this sweet piece of coat hanger here that I'm going to use as my pointer for the degree wheel. I've also got a degree wheel adapter that I made especially for this degree wheel and a Honda 450cc based engine. This Moroso degree wheel will fit right on here, tighten down, and this degree wheel will actually thread right on to a Honda TRX450 flywheel, and I won't even have to remove the flywheel in order to degree the engine in. Next, I've got a custom aluminum piston stop that a buddy made me. Next, you'll see a Mitutoyo dial indicator and a Noga, I think that's how you say it, N-O-G-A, dial indicator holder. I use these two here because they're accurate and very repeatable. I've also got some dial indicator extensions here. These are from Anytime Tools. And another little tool that I use to get down onto the intake lifters are these reduced diameter dial indicator extensions. You can get these on the MasterCard or Amazon. I also use these big steel blocks here. They're off of my shop press. I stick these on the engine and secure them down, and then I'm able to put my dial indicator right on these. And it's a magnetic base, so it's got something to stick to and be firmly mounted. The last thing that you're going to need, if you not only want to check and see where your cam's at, but you also want to move and adjust your intake center line, is you're going to need either a slotted cam sprocket or an adjustable cam sprocket. So I've got 3 cam sprockets here from a Honda TRX450R. This top one is a stock sprocket. You can see the bolt holes here are perfectly round for the cam sprocket bolts to go through. This sprocket down here is a stock sprocket that has been slotted. You can see that the cam sprocket bolt holes here are slotted to allow the cam to move backwards and forwards if need be. And then this cam sprocket over here has large slots in it. This is actually a Webb Camshafts adjustable cam sprocket. You can move cam timing retarded and advanced quite a bit with this. And let's say you're just degreeing your camshaft in to check to see where it is, and you find that it's off by a few degrees. What you can do, and this probably isn't the most accurate thing to do, is you can actually take a Dremel tool and Dremel out the sides of these cam sprocket bolt mounting holes here to allow this cam sprocket to move forward and back just a little bit to where you can get your cam degreed in to where it needs to be. And if you're wondering, well, which way do I need to move my cam in order to advance or retard it? Advancing it means you spin the cam itself counterclockwise. So you Dremel out this top hole to the left and the bottom hole to the right. That'll allow the cam to move counterclockwise, advancing timing. If you want to retard cam timing, you want to spin the cam clockwise. So that means you'll Dremel out the top hole to the right, Dremel out this side here to the right, and the bottom hole to the left. That will retard cam timing. Okay, so I just mentioned that spinning the cam counterclockwise will advance cam timing, and spinning the cam clockwise will retard cam timing. Let's talk about what that means. Let's check out the whiteboard here. Let's say our camshaft comes from the manufacturer with a 110 degree intake center line. We'll call this straight up. We'll compare our 110 degree intake center line of straight up to a 114 degree intake center line, which is 4 degrees retarded, and a 106 degree intake center line, which is 4 degrees advanced. And all of these measurements are in relation to top dead center. So we look up here, we look at, this is a faux dyno graph that I drew up to show what in general advancing and retarding cam timing will do to power. So generally speaking, and this is not always, but generally retarding the cam timing will favor a power curve that is top end biased, and advancing cam timing will favor the lower RPM. Running cam timing straight up will be somewhere in the middle usually. If you're wondering where your cam timing or intake lobe center should be set, you've got a few options. First, you can consult your camshaft manufacturer and check out the cam card that should have come with your camshaft. This is a Webb Camshafts 242 812 plus 5 Honda TRX450R or Honda CRF450R cam card. Another good practice would be to consult your engine builder on where they want the cam timing set at. Depending on your engine's combination, the valve size, the port layout, your builder might want your intake lobe center set advanced or retarded from what the manufacturer suggests. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick aside here and talk to you guys about the engine that I'm going to be doing this cam degree how-to video on. It's probably going to be a little bit different than what you guys have. This is a dedicated drag racing engine. It's been bored and stroked to 649 cc's. It's got a billet cylinder, a billet cylinder head. It also has a billet cam and a billet cam tower with big buckets. You guys will be able to see those once we crack it open and we get started with the process. Also, on this side, not only you see the lockout clutch here, but instead of the crankshaft check hole here, we've got a remote starter nut. That's what I'm going to be using to turn the engine over as we degree the cam in. Usually this will not be here, this fitting and this stud coming out. You'll have a crankshaft check hole here that you'll remove, and then you'll use an Allen cap to actually put in here and use a ratchet to crank the engine over. So I just wanted to take a minute to show you guys the differences between this engine and a normal 450cc based Honda engine. And so that's what it is. Now we're going to get started. If you're going to degree your cam with the engine in the frame, you're first going to have to remove your seat, your gas tank, your plastics, and all that good stuff in order to get to the top of the engine. But like I said, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to show you guys how to do it on the bench. First step is to remove the 3 valve cover bolts. After you remove those 3 valve cover bolts, you can remove the valve cover carefully with its gasket, and then you'll need to use a spark plug socket and remove the spark plug. Now, with the valve cover and the spark plug removed, we'll set our engine to top dead center and ensure that it is timed correctly. We want to make sure that our timing is set correctly, because if our timing is off just one tooth, that means that our intake center line can be off as much as 20 degrees. So in order to verify that our cam is timed properly, we'll have to remove the check hole here on top of the flywheel. And also for most engines, we'll have to remove the crank check hole cap here on the clutch side. And that's so that we can get to the Allen cap to be able to turn the engine over manually with a ratchet. On this particular engine, again, this is a dedicated drag racing engine, so we've got a remote starter nut and bolt sticking out here. That's what we're going to use to be able to turn the engine over manually. Okay, so once you've got your flywheel check hole and your crank check hole plugs out, you're going to want to put an Allen wrench on a ratchet, stick it through here so that you can rotate your engine over manually. You're going to come up here, you're going to rotate your engine over manually until your intake lobes on your cam are facing back and slightly up, like this. Then you're going to take a flashlight and you're going to look down here in your flywheel check hole, and you're going to rotate your engine over, or have a buddy rotate your engine over while you watch for it. And you're going to look for a mark with a small T next to it. And you're going to want to line that up with the slit running down those threads right there in the flywheel check hole. So trying to do that on camera with a flashlight through that hole is really hard. So I've got an extra flywheel here to show you guys what I'm talking about. The mark you're looking for is, if this camera will focus, a little dash there with a T next to it. That's what you want to line up. Not this other mark. There is another mark on all the flywheels with an F. That's for fire. The T is for timing. You want that dash there with the T on it to line up, and then you're going to come back up after you've lined that up with your flywheel check hole to your cam sprocket. Make sure you're level, looking at your cam sprocket. On the left hand side, you're going to find the little tick mark on your cam sprocket, and make sure that lines up perfectly with the arrow behind it on your cam tower. Now my tower is a billet cam tower, and the little arrow kind of sucks on it, but the arrow is going to be much more apparent on a stock cast cam tower. Those two, that little dash there on the cam sprocket and the arrow on the cam tower, need to line up perfectly. Otherwise, your cam timing is either advanced or retarded. Now, once all your timing marks line up, that means your cam is in time and you are at top dead center. Now it's time to check your valve lash or your valve clearance. And we'll do that using our feeler gauges. And the reason that we want to go ahead and check our valve lash or our valve clearance is not only when we put this thing back together do we want to have our valve clearance in spec, but also because we need to see where it's at in order to set our valve lash to 0 whenever we're degreeing in the cam. We want to be at 0 valve lash whenever we're degreeing the cam in, not at 0.006 and 0.011. We want to be at 0 or less valve lash. Okay, now that the engine is at top dead center and your cam lobes are facing towards the rear and slightly up, you're going to use feeler gauges to check and see what the valve clearance or valve lash is currently. For this, you can use straight feeler gauges. Most people use these on the exhaust side. And then on the intake side, a lot of people like to use these angled feeler gauges. Me personally, I like to use the straight feeler gauges for both. It just seems to work better for me. So we'll start with the exhaust side. To find out what your valve clearance should be, you can either consult your cam card or give the cam manufacturer a call. For this particular cam, valve clearance on the exhaust side is 9 thousandths of an inch or 0.009, and valve clearance on the intake side is 6 thousandths of an inch or 0.006. And they allow for a margin of plus or minus 1 thousandths of an inch. So anywhere between 0.008 to 0.010 for exhaust, and anywhere between 5 thousandths and 7 thousandths on the intake side. So starting on the exhaust side, I usually try and take a little bit smaller feeler gauge to make sure it's going to fit. We're starting with a 0.008 or 8 thousandths feeler gauge. And how we get the valve clearance on the exhaust side is you got to take and slip the feeler gauge here on top of the valve stem, in between the shim on top of the valve here and the exhaust rocker arm, just like this. And what you're looking for is kind of a nice tight feel there. See how that kind of slips in and out pretty easy? And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. And you're going to repeat this process until you get the right feeler gauge in there to where there's a pretty good amount of tension. Once you use feeler gauges that are a little bit too small and a little bit too thick, you'll find the sweet spot and you'll know exactly what you're looking for. Once you've checked the clearance on each exhaust valve, make sure you write down what the clearance is. Now we're going to get the intake valve clearance, and instead of measuring between the shim here at the top of the valve and the rocker arm like we did for the exhaust, the intake side has buckets that the intake lobes roll over and compress. And in order to get your valve clearance here on the intake side, you're going to go underneath each cam lobe and on top of that bucket right there. And that's where you're going to get your intake valve clearance. And I've got the feeler gauge over here on the left side already slipped in, so you can kind of see where it needs to go. It needs to slip right between the base circle of the intake lobe and the top of that bucket. And again, the process is the same. I usually start with a smaller feeler gauge size, make sure it'll go in, and then gradually work my way up, and you'll be able to feel what the right size is. Write down your intake valve clearance measurements as well. Now I've got my valve clearances all written down. You see the exhaust is right in spec. The right intake valve is within spec, and my left intake valve is a little bit tight. So once we pull our cam and cam tower out of our engine, we'll be able to see what size shims are in there. And between those size shims and our clearances here, we'll be able to figure out what size shims need to go back in order to achieve 0 valve lash, which is what we need whenever we're degreeing the cam. The next step we're going to take is removing the stator and stator cover. It's on the left side of the engine here. It's held in with 9 bolts. So on this engine here, those 9 bolts are Allen caps, but usually on stock engines, they are 8mm head hex. And before you remove this cover, I would recommend going ahead and draining the engine oil, because if you don't, once you take this cover off, all the engine oil is going to drain out right here on the side of the engine. Another word of caution, and this is another place where an extra set of hands comes in handy. Once you remove the 9 bolts and you go to pull the stator cover off, the stator is a big magnet and the flywheel is a big chunk of steel, so the stator kind of wants to stick to the flywheel, and it can be kind of hard to pull off sometimes. Plus there are a couple of dowels in between the center case and the stator, so if you've got a buddy that you can have come over and hold the engine while you try and pull the stator cover straight off, that'll help a lot. Okay, so now we've got our 9 bolts removed and the stator is off. There's a gasket in between the stator cover and the center case. Usually if you're careful and the gasket isn't too old, you can, and it doesn't rip, you can usually reuse that gasket. If it's old or it rips, you might want to go ahead and replace that gasket because it's going to leak oil. Another thing to note, there are 3 plugs that come off of the stator. This one only has 2 since it's a drag engine. There are 3. You can leave them plugged in if you're doing this in the bike, as long as you can place your stator and stator cover kind of up out of the way, maybe zip tie it, maybe prop it on something. Otherwise you'll have to unplug the 3 connectors and snake the wires out so you can remove the stator and cover completely. And again, just a word of note here, there are 2 dowels that go between the stator cover and the center case. And with the stator cover removed, this is what your engine should look like now. And at this point, if you don't have a degree wheel or an adapter where you can leave the flywheel on and degree the cam in, this is where you're going to need to take the flywheel off. And you can do that by first removing this nut. Usually use an impact on it. And again, an impact with really good loosening torque is recommended here. And whenever you go to take this off with an impact, you or your buddy will also need to hold the crank in place via the Allen wrench in the crank check hole over here. And another quick note, this is a standard nut, so counterclockwise we'll zip this nut right off. The next step in removing your flywheel after you've removed this nut is you'll need your flywheel puller. And I'd highly recommend using a flywheel puller specific to your quad or bike and not just a general puller. This Motion Pro flywheel puller actually comes with a crank protection cap that will thread right on here to the end of the crank. It protects it from the puller pushing in the snout of the crank. Your next step would be to screw this on. Obviously that would thread right on with the nut off of there. Then you're going to grab your puller, you're going to back this guy out all the way, and then this threads right onto the flywheel. And then you're going to take and tighten this guy down, which is in turn going to push on that cap that you just put over your crank snout, and it's going to pull the flywheel off. Then you'll remove this and remove your cap, and your flywheel will be off. But again, I've got this adapter that I made especially for this so that I can degree a cam in without having to remove the flywheel, so I'm not going to do that step. Okay, so the reasoning behind removing the flywheel is if you've got just your run-of-the-mill Hott cams degree kit and you don't have an adapter that allows you to degree your cam in with the flywheel on, is that the Hott cams kit has bushings that will slip over the crankshaft. Then the degree wheel will slip over top of the bushing, and then you will put this nut back on and sandwich it down such that your degree wheel will then be mounted on your crankshaft. Next, you're going to want to loosen up the 2 cam sprocket bolts here. They take a 6mm Allen, and they are usually installed with red Loctite, so they're probably going to be a little bit tough to get out. Either you or a buddy will also need to hold the engine over here so that the cam sprocket doesn't spin when you're trying to loosen these bolts. So just loosen these, but don't take them out all the way yet. We'll move on to the next step, and then we'll come back up and take them out all the way. The next step after that will be removing the cam chain tensioner. This one here has a custom manual cam chain tensioner. Yours will look quite a bit different. I'll see if I can find a picture of one and stick it in the video. It's probably easiest just to go ahead and remove it completely from the cylinder. Okay, once you've got your cam chain tensioner either removed or backed all the way out, and what I like to do to make sure that this thing doesn't jump time and mess up our cam degreeing endeavor is I'll zip tie the cam chain to the cam sprocket in a couple of places. Then I'll remove the cam sprocket bolts all the way. And even with the cam chain zip tied to the cam sprocket up top here, there still is a chance that it could jump time down below on the crank sprocket. So in order to try and combat that, I'll take a magnet, stick it to the side of the cam chain, and have it hanging off the side here to keep a little bit of pressure up on the chain. You can try to rig up something similar. Another quick note is if you're trying to do this with the engine in the frame, you're only going to be able to get to this bottom bolt here. With the engine sitting in the frame, usually the frame will come down about right here and you won't be able to get to this top bolt. So you'll need to rotate the engine around to where this bolt is on the bottom, take it out completely, rotate the engine back around, zip tie it, and then take out this bolt. A lot easier to do on the bench, but it is definitely doable with the engine in the frame. Alright, now I've got my cam sprocket bolts removed and I've slipped my cam sprocket off of the cam flange. Got my magnet here kind of holding everything up. Move on to the next step. We're going to remove these 4 bolts in order to get the cam carrier and cam out of the way. You may have to rock this back and forth a little bit to get it to come up, because there are dowels that sit down in the cylinder head and up inside of the cam carrier. And you're going to want to watch as you pull it up. A lot of times the buckets will stay in the cam carrier here, and a lot of times the shims will actually stick to the buckets and fall out just like this one did here. Exhaust shims are here. Intake shims will either be on top of the intake valves or up inside here, inside of the intake bucket. And then next what I like to do is just take a magnet and pull each shim out one at a time and place it in the correct position right on my note card where I wrote down my valve clearance measurements. Now with all of our shims out, we're ready to measure the shims and figure out what size shims we need to put back in there to achieve our 0 valve lash. Okay, here's all my shims out and in their proper places. And you can find out what size they are a couple different ways. Sometimes you can kind of see what size they are by the markings on them. This one here, if you can see it, is a 2.70 millimeter Hott cams. And if you can't see what they are, or if you want to verify, you can use a good set of calipers to measure them. Okay, so we're going to come back to the whiteboard here real quick. And now that we've got our valve clearance and our shim sizes, we can figure out what shims we need to put back in the engine to get the 0 valve lash. I got a couple of notes in red down at the bottom of the whiteboard. The first note is that 1/1000th of an inch is equal to 0.025 millimeters. And that'll come in handy whenever we're converting up here between inches and millimeters. We took our valve clearance in inches, or thousandths of an inch, and our shim sizes are all in millimeters. In the second note over here in red, this is a link to the CRF's only valve shim calculator. You can actually take and put in your current valve clearance, your shim size, and your desired valve clearance, and it'll give you what shim you need to put in there. So I've got all 4 of my measurements up here on the board, but I'm only going to talk through the left exhaust valve measurement because the rest of them are computed pretty much the same. If we use our conversion factors down here, we'll take our valve clearance of 0.09 of an inch and our shim size of 1.55 millimeters and find that we'll need a shim that is 0.225 millimeters thicker than our current shim. And 0.225 millimeters thicker than our 1.55 millimeter shim would put us at a shim size of 1.775 millimeters. Now, if you're using the Hott Cam shim kit, you're going to find that they only come in 0.05 millimeter increments. You can order like half shim sizes directly from like an OEM parts retailer. Like you can get a 1.72 millimeter shim, or you get a 1.78 millimeter shim. But in this case, we're just going to jump right up to a 1.80 millimeter shim. That will take us to 0 valve lash and then some. It'd actually be minus 1/1000th of an inch. And in the case of degreeing a camshaft, it's actually better to have less valve lash than too much. So if given a choice between a thicker and thinner shim, you're going to want to go with the thicker shim. That way you definitely do not have any valve clearance. This is the Hott Cam shim kit. It comes with 2 boxes. The shims that a Honda TRX450R or a CRF450R will take are 9.48 millimeters in diameter. Make sure you order the right ones. And this thing comes with shim sizes from 1.20 millimeters all the way up to 3.5 millimeters thick. So I've already got my shims picked out and in place. Make sure they're seated properly, and I recommend putting a drop or two of engine oil on them as well. When you install your cam tower back onto the head, make sure that the intake buckets are inside the carrier, and then as you install, make sure that your cam lobes are facing back and slightly up like this. Then you'll put your 4 cam carrier bolts in, get out your torque wrench, torque them down to 10 foot-pounds. Once you've got all 4 cam carrier bolts torqued down, recheck your valve clearances. What I do is I'll take my smallest feeler gauge, which is 1/1000 of an inch, and I'll make sure I cannot fit it in between the shim and the rocker on the exhaust side, and it won't go between the bucket and the bottom of the intake lobe on the intake side. If you can get a small feeler gauge in between the exhaust rocker and the exhaust shim, or the base circle of the intake lobe and the intake bucket, you're going to need to take it back off and increase your shim sizes. You need to do this until you get to where you're at 0 valve lash. Now with 0 valve lash, you can reinstall the cam sprocket onto the cam flange, reinstall the cam sprocket bolts, and tighten them down pretty good. You don't need to use red Loctite just yet. Whenever you do final reassembly, you'll need to use red Loctite on these. But since we'll at least be taking this back apart one more time to get our valve clearance back in spec after degreeing the cam, you don't need to use red Loctite just yet. Then clip off the zip ties that we had holding the cam chain to the cam sprocket. And finally reinstall your cam chain tensioner. And now we're finally ready to actually degree the cam. Alright, so off camera I have set the engine up to degree in the cam. And what I like to do is I like to use a ratchet strap and some wood to block up the engine. And I like to strap the engine down to the table. This keeps it from wanting to move around on me as I'm rotating the engine over and trying to get an accurate reading. If you're degreeing your cam with the engine in the frame, you won't really need to worry about this. You can just block up the tires. And then over here on the other side, you can see I used these big steel or iron blocks that came off my shop press. I've got those stacked on the rear of the case here in order to give my dial indicator holder a little bit more height. And I've got those shimmed up and zip tied down so that they don't move. And then there's the dial indicator in the holder. It's got an extension and one of those reduced diameter shafts on it. Then here you can see I've got the degree wheel adapter threaded directly onto the flywheel. I tightened it down so it won't move. Now I've got the degree wheel mounted on the front here. And then I've got my coat hanger that I'm using as a pointer attached here. And it's bent up to where it comes right down in front of the degree wheel. So our next step is to actually find and set our degree wheel and our pointer at true top dead center. And we're going to do that with piston stop. I'm going to take a minute to talk about true top dead center, what it is, and how to find it. So since the crankshaft, the rod, the piston, and the piston's wrist pin are all part of the engine's rotating assembly, as the piston comes up in the bore and reaches top dead center, it actually stays at top dead center for a few degrees. In this few degrees, as the crankshaft rotates and the rod rotates around the piston's wrist pin, is known as the piston's dwell time at top dead center. And a piston's dwell time can vary greatly by engine. And there are quite a few factors that affect a piston's dwell time. These include rod ratio and rod length, among other things. However, for the purposes of this video, what we're trying to find is the middle of this dwell period. So true top dead center is right in the middle of this dwell period where the piston is at top dead center. So we're going to find true top dead center with a piston stop. And this piston stop, as we rotate the engine forward and back, it's going to stop the piston at the same position on either side of true top dead center. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take the readings from our degree wheel at the two positions that the piston stops against the piston stop, and we're going to split the difference. So what we need to do is set our degree wheel and pointer at this split difference. And I've got a really bad illustration of this down at the bottom left of the whiteboard. I'll zoom it in now. Okay, so in this illustration, blue circle is the degree wheel. The top here, 0, is top dead center. The bottom is 180 degrees, which is bottom dead center. And this red thing is our pointer. And what we want to end up with is our piston hitting the stop an equal amount of degrees before top dead center and after top dead center. So this process takes a little bit of trial and error. You'll have to either move your pointer or loosen up your degree wheel and move it to achieve this reading. And these degree readings here, before and after top dead center of 40 degrees, those are just examples. Those could be anything. Those will just depend on your engine specifics and the length of your piston stop. The important thing is that you want your degree wheel and pointer set such that the piston stops the same amount of degrees before and after top dead center. So you're going to come up top here and you're going to take your piston stop and put it down into the spark plug hole. Start threading it in. If you're at or anywhere near top dead center, this is going to be pushing the piston down into the bore as you thread it in. So make sure it's threaded in all the way and you snug it up pretty good. Now I'm going to show what this looks like in practice here on my engine. You can see I've got my wheel taped off here with the events labeled: after top dead center, before bottom dead center, after bottom dead center, and before top dead center. You see the pointer coming down right here. Hopefully you can see that on video. And our 0 top dead center is here. So I've already moved my degree wheel and pointer to where the piston stop is the same amount of degrees on either side of top dead center. So here you can see after top dead center, we're right at 39.5 degrees. And if I rotate the engine over, we are right at 39.5 degrees before top dead center. So the piston stop is getting hit on the same amount of degrees on either side of top dead center. That means once we remove the piston stop, we know that our pointer and degree wheel, when set to 0 degrees or top dead center, is actually at true top dead center. Next, you'll remove the piston stop, rotate the engine around manually until your degree wheel and pointer are at 0 degrees or top dead center. Then you're going to set up your dial indicator, something like this, so that the plunger of the dial indicator is sitting on top of the flat part of the intake bucket. Now this is a tight space in here. You're going to have to try and just do the best you can. It's a little easier on this engine because it's got larger diameter buckets. But you got to get this thing in here so that it's sitting flat and so that the dial indicator is traveling on the same plane, that is the same angle that the bucket is. So the dial indicator is going to be angled slightly towards the rear of the bike. And make sure you've got plenty of travel both up and down. Then you're going to zero the dial indicator. So one thing to take note of if your dial indicator has this feature is it's got an inner dial here. Make note of where that inner dial is because we're going to need to reference that whenever we're coming back around to our intake valve closing event. So now we're just going to rotate our engine over manually. We're going to do it slowly and in the direction that the engine normally rotates. So on our Honda 450cc based single cylinders, it's going to be clockwise. And then as the cam rotates around and it starts depressing the intake buckets, you're going to see the dial indicator is going to start moving. And we want to let it move just to 50 thousandths. This means that the intake valve is now 50 thousandths off of its seat. And once we get it to 50 thousandths here, nice and slow, right about there, we're going to take our reading on the degree wheel. Now if you come around too fast and you miss the 50 thousandths, you can back it up, meaning you can spin the engine counterclockwise, back it up past the event that we're looking for here, which is the 50 thousandths intake opening, and come at it again. But it's important that you take the reading where the engine gets to the timing event in its normal direction of rotation. Okay, so we're going to take our reading on the degree wheel, and usually the intake valve opening at 50 thousandths is before top dead center. So on the degree wheel, you're going to want to take the reading of the number of degrees before top dead center. Now some cams, low overlap cams, this event might happen after top dead center, but most of the Honda 450 based engine cams, this valve timing event is going to happen before top dead center. So after you take that reading, we're going to continue rotating the engine around in its normal direction of rotation, which is clockwise. So as you continue the manual rotation of the engine, you're going to see the intake lobes of the cam press the buckets down all the way and open the valves all the way. And then right at its peak, it's going to want to roll over really fast and close those valves back. So you kind of got to go real slow here and almost catch the cam on the other side and let it come up really slow and let the valves close really slow. This is especially true if you've got a good strong set of valve springs. So here at this time is where we need to start watching our inner dial to see where it is going to return to our 0 mark, or where it was. And what we're interested in here is getting it to where the intake valve is 50 thousandths before it closes. So for us, it's about right there. And here we want to take the reading on the degree wheel. We want to get the number of degrees after bottom dead center. So you're going to find bottom dead center on your degree wheel and get the number of degrees past bottom dead center that the degree wheel is at now. Now let's say that you go too far. See, we're already within 10 thousandths of being back to 0, or the valve is only 10 thousandths off of its seat. What you can do is spin the engine back counterclockwise, back it way up past the 50 thousandths before closing, and come at it again. But again, it's important to, whenever you're taking these readings, to take them whenever the engine is in its normal direction of rotation process. Now those are the two measurements that we need. I like to repeat the process for both measurements several times to make sure I'm getting consistent, accurate readings within a quarter of a degree or so. This is especially important if it's your first time doing this process. You may need to tweak your dial indicator setup or how you have it positioned on the bucket. Just repeat the process until you get consistent readings on both sides. Now that we've got our readings at 50 thousandths of an inch, all we have to do to find the intake lobe center line is a little bit of math. I've got some numbers here on the whiteboard. These aren't actual numbers, I'm just using these as an example. So for most aftermarket Honda TRX450R, CRF450R camshafts, we're going to use this top formula where the valve opens before top dead center. So if our intake valve is open 50 thousandths of an inch at 21.5 degrees before top dead center, and our intake valve is open 50 thousandths of an inch 60.5 degrees after bottom dead center, we take those two numbers, we take 180, which is the distance from top dead center to bottom dead center, and we add all three of these numbers together. In this example, that results in 262 degrees, and that's our total intake duration at 50 thousandths of an inch. To get our intake center line, we take our total duration, divide it by 2, and then subtract 21.5 degrees, which is our intake open 50 thousandths of an inch before top dead center reading. This results in an intake center line of 109.5 degrees. Now I've got another example down below, and this is for if the valve opens after top dead center. And sometimes this is the case if your cam has very low overlap. So in this example, I left the after bottom dead center reading the same. And I have, for example, that the intake is open at 50 thousandths of an inch at 21.5 degrees after top dead center. And if it opens after top dead center, we treat that as a negative number here. So we add these two together here, our after bottom dead center and our 180 degrees, which is our distance from TDC to BDC, and then subtract our after TDC intake open measurement. That would give us a total duration of 219 degrees at 50 thousandths. Then to compute our intake center line, it's relatively the same. We take our total intake duration, divide it by 2, but instead of subtracting our before top dead center degree number, we're adding our after top dead center degree number. So just for example, this would work out to have a 131 degree intake center line. So coming back up to our first example where we have a 109.5 degree intake center line, let's talk about what that means. If my cam card says that my intake center line should be 110 degrees, the 109.5 degree intake center line that we came up with means that our cam is a half a degree advanced. And let's say for argument's sake that instead of 109.5 degree intake center line, we came up with 115 degrees intake center line. If our cam card said that the cam should have 110 degree intake center line, that would mean that our intake center line would be 5 degrees retarded. So a lower number intake center line means that the cam is more advanced, and a higher number intake center line means that the cam is more retarded. You can also find and set the exhaust center line in much the same fashion, except you'll have to use your dial indicator to take readings off of either the rocker arm or probably more preferably the top of the exhaust valve shims. The formula for getting the exhaust center line is just a little bit different. For that, you can consult Web Camshafts degreeing page. I showed it on a whiteboard earlier, and I'll also stick the link to that website in the video description. Now that you know where your cam's at, you can either make the decision to call it good and put it back together, or you can use a slotted or adjustable cam sprocket to adjust the cam timing and repeat the process. Remember that spinning the cam itself clockwise retards cam timing, and spinning the cam itself counterclockwise advances cam timing. Retarding cam timing favors top end power, and advancing cam timing generally favors low end power. Remember to disassemble and set your valve lash back to spec. Lock tight your cam sprocket bolts and torque your flywheel nut, your cam tower bolts, and valve cover bolts to spec. Also remember that moving cam timing can greatly affect piston to valve clearance. I'm hoping to put together a piston to valve clay checking video in the coming weeks. Okay, so that's a wrap. I know it's a super long video. Hopefully you guys were able to hang in there. If nothing else, maybe you can skip around in the video and fill in any gaps where you're lacking knowledge. Also wanted to give a quick shout out and thank you to John Dyer at Racer's Edge, Arizona, and my buddy Cole Pominville. The first couple times that I degree to cam, they helped me out and answered a lot of my questions. So without their help, I wouldn't have been able to put this video together. Also, if you're not already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, comment, give me some feedback. In between videos, you can follow me on social media at Hot Boys Racing on Instagram and Hot Boys Racing on Facebook. I'll put links to both of those in the description below. And thanks for watching.